is a place where you can write in a question and send it there. So that's how you can talk with us from now on. Okay? So I'm gonna mute all the participants.
Muted.
Okay, but we're only asking a few people to unmute themselves. And at this point, we'd like Latanya, Antoinette, and Loretta, who are together in Kentucky. Could you unmute yourself, please? So use *6 to do that.
Can you hear us?
Now we can. Perfect. And Sindine and Katita, I don't think you need to unmute yourselves unless you want to. Okay, or feel like you need to. Otherwise, just you know how to find me. Okay, so we'll just give this another minute or so, and then we'll get started. We can hear you. We can hear you whispering, but we can't hear what you're saying. Maybe it's just too beautiful a day in too many places and people went outside and didn't come back. There's a lot more people signed up than are on it right now. I mean, we do know that the drop-off rate is usually is about 50%, but this is a little higher than that. So we'll just wait another minute. For those of you who just joined, participants, you are muted. If you have any questions, you can ask your, down in the bottom there, the chat box. I see that Darlene and some other people have found the chat box. I know many of you have been on this service, the system before. So there is a little chat box down in the left-hand corner, and we will talk about that in just a little bit. So. Okay, I'm seeing that it is 2 o'clock now, and I don't want to keep people waiting, so why don't we begin? Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I am Sue Osthoff, and I'm with the National Clearinghouse for the Defense of Battered Women, which is in Philadelphia, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. Before we begin the presentation, I will briefly go over some of the logistics for today's webinar, and it's never as brief as we wish because there are a lot of technical aspects to doing a webinar, as I'm sure many of you already know. If you're disconnected at any time, just go back to that original email that was resent this morning and click on the link again to log back in. And if you continue to have problems getting back on, please call iLink support at 800-799-4510. And Sindine, just one of my wing women for the day, my coworker Sindine, just typed that into the chat box in the lower left-hand corner there for you. So thanks, Sindine. And thanks to Katita Cavero and Emily Bach for the help as well, my other two coworkers. Here is information about how to reach Sindine, Katita, and our office if you need it during the webinar. And for those of you who have just called in, I will quickly say these email addresses. They are also posted on the PowerPoint that is up on Google Docs. It's an updated PowerPoint with this information in it. Sindine, it's CINDENE at ncdbw.org. Katita, it's QUETITA at ncdbw.org. They're just terrible letters, we know that. And our phone number is 215-351-0010 if you have any questions that you, for those of you who are just in on the audio portion. As I already mentioned, and many of you already have seen, the chat box is in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. The small box at the very bottom is where you want to go in, put your cursor in there, type there, and then hit enter, and it should post. So why don't we just try that now? It would be great to find out who's on this call. Some of you have already checked in and let us know, so we appreciate that. But for those of you who haven't done so, if you could go to the chat box and just say, where you're calling in from, and if there's more than one of you at your particular computer or your station, can you let us know how many of you are there? That would be helpful. Welcome. It's great seeing people from all over the country. Thank you. It looks like people are finding that chat box. Thanks a lot for checking in. And again, if there's more than one of you there, please make sure that you let us know. That's very helpful. If any technical problems come up during the webinar, you can go over to, you see up at the top of that chat box, it says public. We're in the public chat box now. You can click on the grayed out one that says private. You can find my name, Sue Ostoff, and send me a private message, and I will try to address it or have one of my coworkers address it. So just double click on my name once you get over to the private one, and you can send me a private message. So those of you who just joined, all the participants are on mute, so that's why we will use the chat box. And what we'll do during the webinar is collect questions there. So if you have any questions, feel free to post them there. We will collect them, and in time allowing, we'll get to as many of your questions as we can during about the last 15 minutes of the presentation. We are recording this webinar today, and if you and you'll be able to access on our website. And our website is ncdbw.org, and we'll try to have that up in about a week. I mean, the good news is so far we've been able to get them up a little more quickly than a week afterwards, so you can watch our website for that. You've probably already noticed that this webinar has closed captioning. If you do not want that to appear at the bottom of your screen, if you look up in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, you'll see a little iLink logo, a little, it says it, so just the word. Directly in the middle there is a little box with a double CC for closed captioning. There is a pull-down menu there. If you click on that little arrow there, you pull up the pull-down menu, and you can see hide captioning, and you can put it on that. Click on that, and it will get rid of the captioning if you do not want that. It's great that we're having closed captioning today, and for any of you who want it in the future, if you can give us at least 5 days notice, that's particularly helpful, and then we can schedule that. Before we actually go over to the presentation, we have a couple of questions that we would like to ask you, and it's really helpful if you would take the time to answer these. What's going to happen for those of you who are signed in through iLink, where you are signed in through the webinar service, what we're going to do is pull up these questions. They'll appear on your screen, and what we're going to ask you to do is you click right on the screen. There's some dots next to the answers. So if you click on the dots, that's really helpful. In question number 1 and number 3, there is a place for other. If you can click on other and then go to the chat box, that would be great. Let me pull these up. And we'll just do the 3 questions at the time. So do you see those little dots? Like, how do you describe your profession? If you're a community-based advocate, just go ahead and click in that dot right there on your screen. If you're something else that's not listed there, if you click other, and then you can let us know in the chat box, what is your profession that's not covered above? That would be great. And we really are trying to track who is an OVW grantee and who is not. So if you could take time to answer that question as well, that's very helpful, yes or no. And for those of you who answer yes, if you can go and say which grant program you are part of, that would be incredibly helpful. Again, if you're not one of the grant program, part of one of the grant programs listed, please go down to other, click that on the screen, and then go over and write the name of your grant program in the chat box, please. Okay. Give you just another minute or so. Thank you for doing that. So are there any people who aren't community-based advocates or coalition staff, et cetera? If you're not listed there, if you can tell us what you are over in the chat box, that would be helpful. Okay, we'll just leave that up for another couple seconds, and then we will move on. Okay. Go back. For those of you who just joined, I'm Sue Ostoff with the National Clearinghouse for the Defense of Battered Women, and I do want to extend a warm welcome to all of you. This is the second in our series of webinars about when survivors reenter their communities after jail or prison. And if you missed the first in our webinar in this series, it was by Stephanie Covington. A recording of it, and that will pull up copies of the PowerPoint once you start listening to it, is posted on our website. So you can go to our website, ncdbw.org, and then go to resources, and that will get you to our webinar series. There is another webinar scheduled soon. It's actually scheduled for Monday. It is called, the title of it is Victimized Again, How the Reentry Process Perpetuates Violence Against Survivors of Domestic Violence. And that will be, as I said, on Monday, June 3rd, and that will be from 3 o'clock to 4:30 Eastern Time. We're working very hard to get the announcements up on our website, and please watch your email for announcements. If you don't have information about it, you can email us, and we can send you registration information. And I really want to take the time to thank the Office on Violence Against Women for the support of this project on reentry. It's just so important that they have supported this project, working with women who are reentering their communities. And also want to thank the Family Violence Prevention and Services Program at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, who also are very interested in and committed to reentering women. And our colleagues over at the Better Women's Justice Project have been amazing in helping us learn how to do webinars. So thank you, Marika. I know Carrie isn't there today, so thank all of you over there who have helped so much. So today's webinar, finally, is titled A Second Chance, the Kentucky Domestic Violence Association's Reentry Coaching Project. Our presenters today are three really amazing women from Kentucky who have graciously agreed to talk about what I think is a very exciting project. It's a coaching project, a mentoring project in Kentucky. And they are LaTanya Jones, Antoinette Johnson, and Loretta Gilmore. And I know the print is super small here, and I also have posted this. We have posted this on Google Docs, so you can go and print it out so you can actually spend some more time learning about who our presenters are. But in the interest of time, we're going to move on. I just briefly will say that LaTanya Jones, she works at the Kentucky Domestic Violence Association, and that's Kentucky State Domestic Violence Coalition, and she's been working with incarcerated and formerly incarcerated women for a long time, and is, among other things, currently directing the Second Chance Project. Loretta Gilmore, she works at a community-based domestic violence program in Lexington, and she's the Second Chance Coaching Coordinator. And Antoinette Johnson, the third speaker, has been a long-term consultant with the Kentucky Domestic Violence Association, and among other things, is a group facilitator for the Second Chance Coaching Project. So I've had the pleasure of working with LaTanya and Antoinette for a number of years, and I know along with Loretta they have a lot to share, so I want to get it over to them as fast as I can. Just a reminder, if you're having trouble connecting, try calling iLink support at 800-799-4510. Cindy, maybe you could put that back up again. If you have other questions, put them in the chat box there, or you can call our office at 215-351-0010. Again, if you want to turn off the closed captioning, you can do so by going up to the upper right-hand corner, that little box with the CC in it. You can use the pull down, and it says Hide Closed Captioning, and you can do that. And I want to give a quick shout out to our captioner for today, Christy Arnston from Paradigm Reporting and Captioning, Inc. So thank you. So LaTanya, Antoinette, and Loretta, thank you so much for all your great work and for your willingness to share it with us today. And so without further ado, I want to hand the virtual mic over to you guys, and just a reminder to try to keep your voice up. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. This is LaTanya Jones, and I want to start off by thanking the Clearinghouse for allowing us this opportunity, as well as the Office on Violence Against Women. We're very happy to be able to enter into dialogue with all of you around the work that we're doing and the importance that we feel like our coalition has place on recognizing the connections between domestic violence, intimate partner violence, and subsequent incarceration. So we thank you so much for this opportunity. I wanted to start off with you today for my section in talking about a little bit of information about who KDVA is and some of the service numbers that our coalition has provided with our last count. So we are the Kentucky Domestic Violence Association. We're the coalition of 15 domestic violence programs across the state. We provide services like we are our legislative committee, so we lobby our legislature. We have economic justice programs through our coalition. We provide technical assistance to our program advocates. And specifically what we'll be talking to you today about is our Women and Incarceration project. So a little bit about the numbers for us. In 2011, there were 20,115 emergency protective orders that were issued through the Kentucky courts. The National Network to End Domestic Violence found that one day in 2011, last year, we served several adults and children. I'm sorry, that number is actually missing. I'm sorry. We served 684 adults in one day. I will be quite honest with you all. This is our first time doing a webinar, and I'm a little nervous, so we'll keep going. Some of the other things that we'd like to point out on why we do this work is some of the information that we found out about the prevalence of justice-involved women. According to the Center for American Progress, 2012, the number of incarcerated women has grown by more than 800% over the last 30 years. What they found was 200,000 are behind bars, 1 million are under supervision, 2/3 are incarcerated for nonviolent offenses, and women of color disproportionately are affected. Okay. As far as Kentucky specifically, we know that there are over 4,000 women that are incarcerated in Kentucky's jails and prisons, and in 2005, Kentucky was ranked the 7th highest among 50 states in the percentage of female population who were incarcerated. In 2009, we actually had the fastest growing rate of incarceration for women, and that was at 12%. Our Department of Corrections here in Kentucky estimates that 1 in 35 Kentuckians is incarcerated, and it's the fastest growing rate is for women. So we have definitely recognized in the work that we've been doing most recently, and that's as of about 2007, we really started to look at these numbers and try to figure out what were things that we could be doing as a coalition to reach out to incarcerated women. Some more on the prevalence. In 1991, the Bureau of Justice Statistics survey found that over 36,000 women surveyed, 43% reported being assaulted prior to incarceration, with 50% of them being assaulted by an intimate partner. In March of 2008, the Oklahoma Commission on Children and Youth found that 89% of the incarcerated women sampled reported experiencing physical and sexual abuse as a child or adult, and 70% reported being victims of domestic violence. We use this information from this particular study to help shape our women in incarceration work that we're doing. And in that, it revealed that a study out of New York, a study of 150 women, revealed that 75% of the women reported severe sexual abuse, 33% reported rape by an intimate partner in adulthood, 77% reported physical abuse, and 33% reported sexual assault by strangers and acquaintances. So I share all of those statistics with you not to bore you, and you may already know some of those things, but we wanted to just give you an idea of why we decided to get into this work. What our coalition has done, which may be similar to many coalitions across the country, is we have based all of our services provided based on the needs that survivors tell us. And so this is something that we started noticing since the beginning of our coalition, but decided to pay more attention to it over the last few years. Me personally doing this work, I started working here at KDVA about 9 years ago. And my first day of work was actually at a trial where a woman was being charged with the death of her husband, and she was actually looking at the death penalty. And then in working with her and starting to work with other incarcerated battered women, we have a clemency project in which we identify women who are incarcerated who are there as a result of killing their abusers. And so in looking at that and looking at the reasons that led them, we started to recognize that those the barriers to escape were very, very close to what some of you may have heard of as referred to as the pathways to incarceration. And it's also one of the questions that we get asked most frequently in doing this work, and that's about why does a person stay, and what are those barriers to escape? And so for those of you who are doing this work, we know that fear is one of the motivating factors that helps to keep a victim in a relationship or in contact with her perpetrator. We know that there are barriers to escape. The risk of harm while trying to defend themselves is one of the barriers. We know that there are risks of homelessness if she does escape the relationship. We know that there's risks associated with poverty. And we also know that there are risks associated with entering into the legal system. So as I want to reiterate, in looking at that and having that knowledge about some of the risks that cause them to return to their abusers or make it difficult to escape, they're also very closely linked to an article that we found written by a woman by the last name of Gilfus in 2002. And you'll note that the slide previous to that was sort of similar. And so that's what started leading us into this direction of exploring this a little bit more. So when we talk about those pathways, we're talking about abused and runaway women. If they have run away, it makes them more at risk for entering into a violent relationship as well as entering into the legal justice system. There are charges that are associated with homelessness. There are charges that are associated when women are using substances as a means to cope with their abuse. That also puts them at risk for incarceration when we're talking about untreated addictions. Poverty in itself, some of the choices that victims are made to make as a result of the domestic violence are very similar to some of the choices that they sometimes find themselves making when it comes to the legal justice system, writing bad checks to try to feed their children. Those kinds of things come to mind. Of course, we know the risk of harm to others and also harm to self, but specifically talking about harm to others, we do have a clemency project, which I'll dive into a little bit here shortly. But we know that in trying to defend oneself, someone might be seriously injured. And so that's another way that she might be at risk for entering into the system. And then there are some institutional policies that present themselves as well. When dealing with a batterer, suppose she's living on public assistance or is living in public housing, there are certain rules around who can live in that house. And if she is involved with a batterer, she might not be able to get that batterer out of her home, which puts her at risk for violating those kinds of policies. It could also be around being forced to misuse welfare, income that they might receive from welfare, and they can be charged with things like welfare fraud. And so we started to look at some of the institutional policies that also put women at risk for incarceration. So we offer that to show you the vein of thinking that led to the work that we're doing. But I also want to spend some time talking to you simply about the history of KDVA's work with incarcerated battered women. So you'll see that there's a timeline that we put together. Our work began in the late 80s. As a matter of fact, Sue Osthoff was one of the speakers who came to be with us here in Kentucky. And there was a conference that was held, It Doesn't Have to Hurt to Be Alive. And so this was one of the first dialogues that was open about the defense of battered women. Following this conference, which was held, the conference was actually held in a women's institution. And so following this conference, a member program of ours from the Center for Women and Families, they started doing and going into that prison and conducting domestic violence groups. So that was really our first entrance into the facilities. into this dialogue, but we were approaching it in a way of just trying to open up conversation with women who are incarcerated about domestic violence. It wasn't intense at all. It was basically like doing 101s on domestic violence and just raising that awareness, but we were doing it in a different environment, doing it inside that institution. In 1995, KDVA joined with the Kentucky Commission on Women and the Department of Public Advocacy, and that union led to successfully petitioning our governor at the time on behalf of 19 incarcerated battered women, all of whom who had been charged and convicted of killing their abusers and were serving substantial amounts of time. During that, in 1995, the story says that there was a quilt that was shown to our governor at that time that was done by the women who were in a support group inside of that institution, and this quilt depicted their stories. The rumor is that, well, the story goes that he ended up shedding a tear at our state fair, and that moved him to go and give the parole board a nod that said he would be giving them some names and that they should let these women go, so grant them clemency. What he did not expect, or what he did expect, was that governors behind him would continue to do that. And he didn't anticipate the difficulties associated with being released but still having the felony on your record. So we saw something wonderful in their release, but it also taught us that there was even more work to do. So the women that I referred to, that first 19, they were called the Sisters in Pain. There was a book that was written about them. They also, a few of them also appeared on a television show, and I'll date myself a little bit, but it was called Donahue at the time. You might remember that. So they appeared on that, and then also some of those ladies also participated in a radio documentary that was focused on telling the stories of incarcerated battered women. In 1996, KDVA hosted clinical and legal dimensions of defending domestic violence. We did that for defense attorneys to try to talk to them about the issue and how we could help them when they were defending women who were charged with crimes. In 2003, we petitioned another governor, Governor Paul Patton, on behalf of 13 new women that we had identified. We were unsuccessful in that petition, and that was very heartbreaking, actually. And it was during this time that I actually came on staff shortly after this happened. And so it kind of hurt people's spirits, but we still decided that it was important to forge on. And glad that we did, because by 2007, we petitioned on behalf of those 13 women that I mentioned, as well as the first group that was released, that group of 19. We petitioned on their behalf so that they could get the full pardons that they had been waiting on for 12 years. They were running into barriers such as not even being able to go to school events because they had it on their record. So again, I reiterate, we quickly learned that, yes, it's wonderful for people to be able to go home, but reentry can be very, very difficult in some of the most mundane of ways if you're not an individual who's facing those barriers. So in 2007, 13 of that original group were granted pardons, and I had the opportunity of working with 6 women who were incarcerated at that time, and those women were all released in 2007. This is a photo that we have. This in the middle is Governor Ernie Fletcher, so he was the one who signed. And right next to him, you'll see Antoinette, and she is one of our presenters on this webinar with you today. Okay. So based on that, based on all the information that we had picked up, based on our experiences in going into the jails and opening up dialogue, we decided that we would create an actual program here at KDVA, and we call that the Women in Incarceration Project. Okay. This is the campaign. So what we do is we work to prevent the arrest of battered women. We work to support battered women while they are incarcerated, and then we work to help empower them once they reenter. And reentry is what leads us into Reentry is what led the clearinghouse to contact us about sharing our information. One of our reentry efforts is that of the Second Chance grants, which were awarded by the Bureau of Justice Assistance out of Department of Justice. Okay. So the way that we set our project up, these were actually called Second Chance Act mentoring grants, and we thought long and hard about the language that we were using, and knowing that for the most part we were going to be working with adult women. Our project, you have to be 18 years old in order to come into the project. And so we wanted to think about the language in which we were using. And in some of the research that I did, sometimes it felt like it could set up a power differential if we were calling people mentors. And so we decided that we wanted our project to be around supporting people and cheering them on, giving them tips where we could. We didn't want people stepping into therapeutic roles or anything like that. And so we decided to call them coaches. So our project is called the Second Chance Reentry Coaching Project. We have partnered with 2 of our domestic violence programs. I told you all that we have 15 programs around the state. We partnered with 2 of those programs and 2 jails. Those partnerships happened in 2 of our largest areas across the state. So we are in Lexington, Kentucky, which is where Loretta Gilmore is from, and she's going to talk to you specifically about that. And then Antoinette is working in our Louisville program, which is actually the largest city in our state. We create case management plans for reentering women. As a result of, we use an assessment that we'll talk about a little bit more, but based on that assessment, we create case plans. And we also have created reentry and domestic violence groups inside the jail that deal with that are specifically for victims of domestic violence, but also talk to them about what it's going to look like once they come out. We've also contracted with formerly incarcerated women to co-facilitate those groups. And we're in the process of creating formerly incarcerated women support groups post-release. Okay. And so now what we're going to do, that's just sort of the description of our program at its minimum. And now Loretta is going to talk to you about our project implementation.
Hi, this is Loretta. When we began to think about how we were going to implement this program, one of the first things that we needed to look at was getting coaches to participate in the program. So part of our recruitment effort was to conduct PSA announcements throughout the community to let people know who we are, what we're doing, the client population that we're serving, and what our need is for those coaches. We also utilized our volunteer pools that we already had at the domestic violence shelters. We spoke to friends. We spoke to friends of friends. We also attend the reentry task force groups in our communities, just really trying to muster support as well as identify potential coaches in our areas. We made the application available on KDVA's website, which is kdva.org. Interested coaches, potential coaches, could then go to the website, download that application, fill it out, send it back to either KDVA or Bluegrass Domestic Violence Program or the Louisville Shelter Program. From there, we would go through the application. We're looking to make sure that they are willing to commit to a year of being with the program, that they're able to meet with the inmate participant every week for at least an hour. We're looking to see if they are living in the areas in which we are serving. If all those things look good, then we would call them in for an interview. During that interview, we are screening for the coach's substance use and or abuse history. We're looking at their mental health history, if they have a criminal history background. We're also looking at their motivation for wanting to be a coach. We're going to discuss further their availability, their interests, their hobbies, and we're really going to look at their ideologies of domestic violence and their ideologies of incarcerated individuals. And if all that seems to go really well, then we are going to set them up with a 2-day training that we conduct here at the Kentucky Domestic Violence Association. And part of that training, we're going to discuss ethics, boundaries, rapport building skills, the roles of a coach, and really roles that they're not supposed to assume as a coach, and much more. Once they went through that training, they will then attend a training orientation at the local jail. And that training lasts about 2 to 3 hours. And they're going to, again, talk about the boundaries of the jail, the environment of the jail, what they can do, what they cannot do as a coach. And after that training, they will then have access to the jail as a volunteer. In addition to that, every coach will receive training throughout the duration of their match. And after they've received their training through the jail and received their training through the Kentucky Domestic Violence Association, we will begin to match them with an inmate participant. And we're really just looking at personalities of both the inmate participant as well as the potential coach. We're looking at their interests, their availability, to help us to determine a fit. Now, as I'm looking at all this information, I'm also looking at what appears to be the strengths and the weaknesses of the coach and what appears to be some strengths and weaknesses of the inmate participant, and trying to fit them in a way that the coaches will be able to strengthen potential weaknesses in the inmate participant. Once we've determined that match, we're then going to set up a meeting between the inmate participant, myself, and the coach. From there, we're going to go in the jail. We're going to go over that case management plan that we're going to talk about a little bit more in a few minutes with both the coach and the inmate participant. And we're really just focused on building that rapport, helping to facilitate that relationship. And from that initial meeting, it will be between the coach and the inmate participant on what days of the week and what time that they will have their future meetings. The second thing that we really had to focus on implementing this program was identifying participants. And again, we needed to recruit those participants. And you'll have to excuse us, we're having a little bit of difficulty getting our slides to transition. But I'm going to keep talking. So what we did was we entered into the jail and we began posting flyers throughout the jail, basically to let the potential inmate participants know who we are, what we're doing, and how we may be of benefit to them. Then we would go in and speak in a group setting, telling a little bit more about the program, what we could offer, what the expectations are, and those sorts of things. But we can also speak to them individually, because there's times that we'll go in and somebody will say, well, such and such is also interested in the program. And then we would identify that person and speak with them individually. We also, from time to time, will get phone calls from the program coordinator within the jail stating that a certain person is interested in the program. So we do have those conversations individually as well. If they decide that they are interested in the program, we will then give them an application. They fill out that application. And we're looking at the application, of course, to make sure they're of age, which they all are, that they're going to reside in the areas that we serve, that they're willing to commit to a year-long program, meeting with their coach once a week, and meeting with second chance staff at least once a month. We also have an expectation that they will attend groups while they're incarcerated as well as when they enter into the community. And if they're willing and they still want to participate in the program at that point, we're going to set up an interview with them. And we're going to ask them just a lot more in depth about those types of things. We're really just trying to get to know them as an individual and hear their story and see how we can best serve them. And the two biggest things during that interview is again, making sure that they're going to reside in the Lexington area and that they have a history of intimate partner abuse. From there, we are going to schedule a meeting to do the 26-page Women's Risk Need Assessment. This assessment is really neat because it is geared specifically towards women, and from my understanding in the prison as well as in the jails, most assessments are designed with men in mind. So it's really kind of neat to know that you're giving an assessment that is gender specific. With that assessment, we're looking at things like their criminal history, their substance abuse history, as well as their current use patterns. We're looking at mental health, their educational strengths and weaknesses, their employment and financial situation, their housing safety, their antisocial friends or lack thereof. We're looking at their anger and their hostility patterns, their abuse trauma as an adult, as well as in their childhood. We're looking at their relationships with their family members and their intimate partners. We're looking at their parenting strengths and weaknesses, as well as their self-efficacy. Once we have conducted an assessment, we're going to go back and we're going to score that assessment, and it is going to help us determine what strengths and weaknesses they may have. At that point, we're going to begin to develop a case management plan. Theoretically speaking, you would develop a case management plan with the client across from you because you would want to be as client-centered as possible. However, given the environment of the local jail, it's not always feasible to do so. So what we do is we take the interview, the application, as well as the assessment. Then we develop that case management plan from there. We then go into the jail, and how we're able to maintain that client-centeredness and empower them is I will often begin with explaining to them how I came up with the case management plan, and then I will extend that they can change it, they can add to it, they can take away, that this is their case management plan. And we have had some people that want to add to and some people that take away from their case management plan, and that is perfectly fine. From there, much like in the coaching scenario, we are going to match them with a coach. Then we're going to schedule that appointment with myself, the coach, and the inmate participant. And we're going to go over their case management plan, again, with the coach, and then we're just going to start building that rapport within that relationship. As far as closing and exiting procedures, we do ask in the beginning of the interviewing process that they commit to a year-long project. However, sometimes that doesn't work out for one reason or another. Perhaps they move to another county, another state. They get out, and the roles that they must assume kind of crowd out the program participation. They can opt out of the program at any time that they want to. As far as exiting people from the program, we give a lot of grace around that, understanding that they do have a lot of barriers and they do have a lot of roles that they must pick up as soon as they walk out of the jail. However, we have had to exit a few for either non-compliance of the program for a prolonged period of time.
Okay, we'll talk. We're still talking about the project implementation, and so one of the components of that, and this is LaTanya again. One of the components of that that we think is important to the whole entire program is our groups. Inside of our project, inside of our Women and Incarceration project, we worked on creating groups that were specific to incarcerated women. And so we have two different types of groups that actually operate within our two different programs who are part of our second chance. In the Lexington group, in the Lexington site, or Lexington jail, we have a group called Choices. And Choices is 8 weeks long, and it talks about just the impact of domestic violence. And so it operates as a support group around domestic violence. In our Lexington jail, what I want to point out is the women who are participating in that group are not in the general population. They are housed within their programming unit. And that was a decision that the jail made. We didn't have any ability to create a group in the general population. We would have liked to do that, but those women are not eligible for groups. So the women who are in that group are kept in a different housing area. In our Louisville site, we have something called Transitions. And Transitions uses Seeking Safety, which you may have heard of, as a template for groups. Like Lexington, the group is helpful in both groups are also helpful in recruiting individuals into our Second Chance project. But the Transitions group is also open-ended. So it happens on a regular schedule, and anybody can enter into that, although we also cover things related to reentry within that group. It also helps to address the issues related to trauma, so we're doing some of that in that Louisville site, as well as some of the issues related to substance abuse. That has been one of the things that we found for the majority of women in both of our sites, is that substance abuse is a huge, huge issue. And so we've had to be creative, and we've had to think about ways to find partners who could really help us address that substance abuse issue. And I will say that is something that we are constantly working on. It's probably the most challenging part of what we're doing. We're going to talk about our challenges later. And so we want to actually spend some time with you talking about the group implementation. And so Antoinette is facilitating our group. She's one of the facilitators of our group in our Louisville, Kentucky site.
Hello, everyone. This is Antoinette. I want to talk to you about facilitation of the groups. The group that I teach is called Transitions, and that group is held once a week at the Louisville jail/work release facility. I want to talk to you about the dynamics of the group. First, about the dynamics of the group, you want to think about who the actual participants are in your group member, who the ladies are. These are ladies that come in that may be in the group. They may have different charges as far as substance abuse charges. They may have shoplifting charges. It could be any of those things. So you want to look at that. Some of the common characteristics that you'll notice about the personalities of the women in the group are a lot of them may just be observant at first. They may not be willing to speak up and talk or share in the group. You have some ladies that are eager to learn something new. You have some that will just sit back and listen. You have to look at the fact, is it easy or hard for them to share in that environment? Being in a jail setting, the atmosphere is a little different. You always know that you're being watched or that other people can hear, and sometimes worry about the confidentiality of a group. If you're sitting next to someone that may be in your same dorm with you and you may not want to share personal information that you think someone could use against you later, in that group we actually do share a confidentiality clause to where we try to get the ladies to warm up and feel comfortable, to let them know that things that are said in the group, we want to stay in the group. How do you tie in the group to the coaching project? When I go into my groups, I explain to them that I am there teaching a transitions class, that the group will be held every week. But the spinoff of this group is that they can, if they meet the requirements, and I read out a list of the eligibility requirements, if they meet those requirements, they are more than welcome to fill out an application and turn it back into me or any of the facilitators that comes in on a weekly basis. And that's how we go about getting clients or participants to get in the coaching reentry program. Some of the barriers that you would think about would be breaking the ice. What things do I do in my group to help break the ice, to help different ladies when they come into the group, because we have different women coming in. It's not always the same women. Sometimes different ladies rotate in. Sometimes a person will come to 2 groups, maybe miss a group and come back. Things that I do, I always start out with just checking in, getting everybody to announce their names so people can, match names with faces and get familiar. I always do usually a special talk just to let them know that I myself am a formerly incarcerated survivor, and to kind of give them insight and hope. If they see someone that's been in their shoes, that's been in a particular circumstance that they've been through in life, and see that someone has turned themselves around from a negative aspect that they started out with, that they turn it into a positive, and that usually grabs their attention. I'm going to go down to threading and weaving. How do you weave your own story into the groups to facilitate, yet still keep the group focused on the session at hand? I use it at times when it's just blank space. When people share, and then you ask, like, would anybody else like to add anything to a quote that we read at the beginning, or anything in our session that anybody would like to talk about? If it gets quiet and no one's wanting to speak or respond, sometimes I'll interject pieces of my story to connect with the lesson, to bring them like a real-life example, a live-life experience. I also do that when sometimes I have to gain control of the group, to where we're not just running on and sticking on one thing and just going on and on about it. And I also use that when I can see that some of the ladies have been triggered. When they hear another lady's story and it's like a mirror image to something that they've been through, when I see that people may be getting emotional and need to check in, sometimes I will stop and use that to kind of gain back the control of the group. How do the women respond to me as a facilitator? And who has been where they are now? A lot of times I see people, when I explain to them that I have been incarcerated or been in jail, it's like almost a look of shock and like amazement, because they're like, wow, really? You're sitting right here and you've been here, you've been in my shoes, and now you're doing something positive, and I want to say it like this, you have a job that isn't just what people would think that a convicted felon can get. As far as working at a fast food restaurant, not being able to get certain jobs because you are a convicted felon. So to see someone in a position to where they're able to give back and do things like that, I think it really brings them inspiration. What does leading the group do for me personally? For me personally, it empowers me. It makes me feel good about myself. It teaches me lessons every day, and it also teaches me to respect people who are currently going through the struggles that I went through. It kind of shows me like a picture of my life before, so I can have something to look at how it was and how it is and how I've grown from that. You have to have flexibility when doing your groups, when doing classes. What I can share about the flexibility required to facilitate the group is that sometimes timing isn't always the way you want it. You think you have an hour, you go in to do your groups, it might be a bad day, they might have to recount because maybe they've had a fire alarm go off, or maybe they're really backed up. So you have to always be flexible. You have to be flexible with your time. You have to be flexible with being inside of groups. If you have someone that had a meltdown in group, that had a trigger, someone that chose to talk more about one part of your lesson than the next, sometimes you have to always be able to get yourself back on track, be able to keep up with it and still be able to get the lesson that you have out there.
As part of our, what we are trying to do, there are some offshoots of groups that we wanted to share some information with you about. These weren't things that we planned at the beginning. Some of it sort of happened organically. Some were being planned in a manner that we didn't know would have anything to do with our project. But because we are in the jails, because we have a presence there, we've also found that this helps us to recruit women into our project.
Absolutely. And one of those such groups is our assertive skill building group. And this group has just recently began. And we just discuss things like different communication styles, what are the benefits, what are the issues with each. We practice skills like the broken record, fogging, inquiry, etc., really trying to build those skills of how to communicate assertively and effectively.
A second group that we have is called the Swallowtail Project, and this was actually an idea that came from some work that I had actually done with Eve Ensler, and you may remember her from the Vagina Monologues. She conducted a writing group in a women's correctional facility in New York, and I had the opportunity to see that and meet some of those women and just felt a strong impulse to try to do something like that in one of our facilities. So we went into, we started off in a federal women's prison in Lexington, and then ended up moving into the jail, which is also where our Second Chance project is housed. And this is a writing group. It's a creative writing group, so we've hired a writer and a photographer, and I also help to facilitate that. We go in weekly, and we just do creative writing with the women in the institution. It's an open group, and we tackle all kinds of topics. Usually we're talking about things that have nothing to do with violence against women, but because we know the numbers are so high, the stories end up being about their experiences, how violence has impacted them, and limited some of the choices that they've actually been able to make. And so we do what I call deep digs in these groups. We have actually created a publication of the same name that's available for you if you're interested in doing this in your own facility. We did this with the purpose of teaching other folks how to go into these jails. So this book is called The Swallowtail Project. It includes photographs from some of the groups, as well as to show the environment in which the women are living in the jail. And then it also gives step-by-step to those who want to facilitate. They have an understanding of what to expect. We have prompts that are included, so they don't even have to start all over. You can use those prompts that are in the book. Our hope is that our second volume will just be the stories of the women, and then we're also working on a play that will be of the same name. We do want to spend some time, so we've talked about the design, we've talked about all the bells and whistles, but we don't think it would be fair if we just left it at that. So, and especially, you know, our thought about conducting this webinar was to really give you the structure of how we do it, in hopes that if you're considering doing something like this in your area, that you would go forth and do that. And so as part of that, we want to share some of the challenges that we've had in keeping this together. And so since I'm the administrator of the grant, I'll share with you some of the administrative challenges that we've had. Like I said, the infrastructure of the project looks awesome, amazing on paper. We were awarded the funds from this grant. They only awarded 6% of the people who applied, and we were awarded the grant. We're the only program that was focused on incarcerated battered women. Some of the projects that applied for the grant received funding only worked with men. Several of them were mixed, but in that, no one was focused specifically on women. And so we were very excited to do that. What we didn't consider was that we needed probably a good 6 to 8 months to actually take what was on paper and then start to implement that. Our plan was, you know, we wrote it, we were funded, and then we were just going to pick up there. Not wise. You need some planning time. And so we definitely learned that. We also had quite a bit of staff turnover in our Louisville site. And so that slowed us down as far as momentum and really getting off the ground there. But I will say one of the beautiful things about that was originally Antoinette's role, and then we have another woman that we've contracted with named Gabrielle. Their role was really just to be present in those groups that she described to you, because of that turnover, they actually, and Antoinette especially, actually ended up being our main facilitator. And I cannot say enough about the value of working with formerly incarcerated women and then allowing them to become leaders in your organizations. So she's actually really kept us afloat in that place. Developing adequate referrals for participants. We actually came to understand that we needed to have other strong partner agencies as part of the project. Talked a little bit about what we found out about substance abuse and how it's imperative that if you're going to do something like this, you partner with someone who is providing those kinds of services. Perhaps you're with a coalition that's a dual program. That's a bonus. We are not. So our programs provide domestic violence services. We needed a partner that was really an expert on the substance abuse. So we needed to do that. We also run into the challenge of the fact that we're not a correction agency. We are not an arm of our corrections services in Kentucky. And our philosophies are different. You know, we are about empowerment. They are about control. And so really it's learning to speak the language has been a challenge. That's why you hear us talking about inmate participants. At every turn, we want to recognize the humanity of the women that we're working with. So I don't like to use the term inmates, although that's how corrections views them. That's how they're talked to when they're inside. We wanted to add a word that we felt like gave them some humanity, which is a participant, that they are a participant in our project. The support of the coaches from an administrative level has been difficult. I do regularly schedule coaching support calls, but it's sometimes difficult. We have several coaches. How many coaches do we have?
We have about 12 to 15 right now.
We have about 12 to 15 in our Lexington site, and then we have 5 on deck in our Louisville site. And just trying to coordinate all of that it can be challenging. Some difficulty that we've had actually in the jail is one of their roles was to actually pre-screen people for us, but for various reasons that doesn't happen, so we end up doing the pre-screening. We have to do a lot of reminding of our correction partners what their role is, and sometimes at some point you just end up doing it yourself, which is fine. It does stretch us as far as capacity goes, though. So that's been challenging, and we've had to be repetitive in certain ways. But I think we're working through that now. So we'll get into now what some of the programmatic challenges have been.
Originally, some of the challenges were identifying possible inmate participants as well as coaches. And then once we had identified possible inmate participants, another challenge was building that rapport. To a lot of the potential inmate participants, they were very leery of us. They were leery of our motives, why we were there, what we were going to truly use that information for. So that was a little bit of a challenge to build that rapport. It was a little bit of a challenge, and still is in some ways, as LaTanya has talked about, identifying and building support within our community and with community agencies and partners. Gathering the statistics has been a huge challenge for this program. Again, we are doing a 26-page assessment on every participant. Then we are also doing a pre-assessment 3 weeks before they're released, and we're also doing a 6-month post-assessment, all of which are 26 pages. And then every time that you have contact with a inmate participant or someone who's already been released into the community, you have to compile your stats for that. So every coach has to do that, as well as second chance staff. And then you compile all of that information, send it to LaTanya, who then compiles both sites' information. So statistics, we probably need 2 or 3 people just to collect the statistics. That's my dream. Let's see. Scheduling, finding times where the coach, the inmate participant, as well as myself can actually meet within the jails has been a little bit of a challenge. Another challenge has been maintaining contact with the participant upon release. Again, many of them are returning to their homes where they have children, they're looking for employment, and they're fulfilling other roles in their life that sometimes make it difficult for them to maintain contact. Thus, the post-release assessment has been a challenge, trying to maintain that contact and get that information 6 months post-release. Really being able to collect accurate data on the recidivism rate has been a little bit difficult, just given the time frame of where we're at in our program. However, what I can tell you is that out of 20 participants so far, to our knowledge, only 2 of them have recidivated at this time. Staffing has been another challenge, just really trying to figure out how many people you need to fulfill the job description or descriptions. And of course, this program, being a pilot program, it keeps growing, and we keep finding new ways to do stuff, and there is such a need with this population, and there's so few resources in the community that it keeps evolving to where we need more staffing.
And as far as challenges on the group, this is Antoinette again. As far as the challenges that we face on the group end, building relationships. When I say building relationships, I'm talking about with the staff and administration, including officers, medical staff, case managers. Keeping that communication open is a little challenging at times. You have to make sure sometimes you do it via email. Sometimes you may be able to see a person face-to-face. A lot of times when you go in, you have to keep reinstating who you are, what you're there for. It's very necessary to keep groups consistent. Sometimes you'll go in and the officers or staff that you see on one week may not be the same the next week, so they may look at you and not know what you're there for and want to know why you're just walking in plain clothes. And you could be sometimes, if you're at a work release program, mistaked as an inmate. So it's very important to have that relationship with them. One of the challenges that we have with the Second Chance coaching project, the communication with the staff, you have to know, you'll speak with these people and see them on a daily basis. You have to know who will be checking you into the building, who's going to issue you your badge, officers that will end up escorting the ladies to group or escorting them out, the staff that will page or call for the ladies to come up to their groups, staff members that will show you where copy machines are located or sign-in sheets, staff members that you may need to get information from when scheduling assessments for coaching coordinators or anything like that. Another challenge would be knowing your role. I'll go back onto it within the facility and making clear what you can and cannot do. A lot of the participants have questions or needs that can be met by staff. So if you redirect and let them know that, so you don't take on more than you can chew. And keeping the group on track, just basically trying to keep things focused and staying on that one accord. You're moving forward, not just staying stuck in one place.
And I'll add this as far as the groups. I told you I'm facilitating the Swallowtail Project. It's challenging just for you as a facilitator to be in the environment. You can, all of a sudden, there might be a corrections officer that just starts yelling and screaming at everybody. I have almost run out a couple of times to great laughter. So just, it can be challenging sometimes just being in an environment yourself, so it's important to be able to process some of that with other people who are going in. Usually, our rule is that we want 2 people going in to facilitate groups. That's to help to manage the group as well as then have someone to debrief with after you've left.
I want to add something. I'm sorry, Antoinette. Another challenge is finding out services that are offered at the facility. Like if they offer GED classes or domestic violence classes and things like that, because some of the ladies will ask for, once they start group, they are very eager to find out information. I know that I was giving out a number for them to be able to call the local shelter to find out for services if they weren't eligible to switch over into the Second Chance Reentry Coaching Project. So I was giving ladies that would be released a number that they couldn't call because they couldn't call collect.
Yeah, that whole making sure that the resources that we're offering are actually legitimate, very difficult because it's a very underserved population of women. And so we don't want to be the ones making promises that we can't keep, and it's been challenging to kind of navigate that. So we'll go to some of the successes that we have had. We don't want to be downers. We created, as part of this, an operational manual. So as we're going through this, we don't have to recreate the wheel every time. We've been very flexible and creative in addressing some of the issues around staff turnover. I mentioned that previously, in that we found with Antoinette and Gabrielle that it actually improved what we were doing, we believe. Most of our kinks in communication have been ironed out, but it seems like we can get new ones as we move along, but some of those have been ironed out. The fact that we received this grant from Second Chance, our state also received a grant, so our Department of Corrections received one. So there seems to be a little bit more openness from them to actually listen to us a little bit and some of our philosophies on working with women. I go in and actually provide training to some of their staff now as a result of that, so that's been good. And then we also participate, I think Loretta mentioned that we're on our local reentry task forces, but we're also on our governor's task force as a result of this work we've been doing. So overall, we think that we have a strong model for what we're doing, and just like anybody else who's charting new territory, we are constantly trying to figure out what it can actually be and trying to build the capacity for that. So while we've not met all of our goals, we're definitely proud of the fact that we are off the ground and we're doing the best that we can. So some of the programmatic successes.
We have been successful in identifying inmate participants as well as coaches and meeting our numbers that were listed in the grant. We have been successful at conducting the original assessment and the pre-release assessment, and that being gender specific. We have been successful in matching the coaches and the participants as far as compatibility. We have been really successful in case management. We've been able to help several of the participants gain access for medical needs, dental needs. We've been able to help them with educational services, mental health services. One of my most favorite things as far as the case management has been helping them to build self-efficacy, looking at their assessment scores on the first assessment and then looking at their efficacy scores, on their pre-release assessment, is showing that we are helping to raise their self-efficacy. We have been able to help people access services for substance abuse and other resources in the community. We have been successful in empowering the participants. Two of the things that I hear repeatedly from the inmate participants are that, one, they feel like they are more supported than they've ever been supported. And the second thing that I hear over and over is that they feel like they have more resources leaving out of the facility than they have ever had on any prior incarceration. We have been somewhat successful in locating community partners. However, as LaTanya said earlier, that's still a work in progress. We're still working on those relationships. And we have been successful at group participation. It has increased overall throughout the program.
And I'll speak about the successes of groups. One of the successes of the Second Chance Coaching Project is actually being able to see the matches firsthand, seeing the actual participant and the coach being matched. It's been powerful to witness the connection between the match. Once the match is made, the participant seems more eager to participate in group and learn more. They also seem to want to share their story in order to encourage other ladies in the group to challenge themselves. Trust and bonding of participants is another success. It has been great to see nervous group members feel their way into the group setting and let go of trust issues in order to openly share and bond with the ladies in the group, as well as me as a facilitator, to see the ladies bond and lean on one another for support and encouragement, seeing them form a sisterhood. We have better communication about groups with the staff, and that is a huge success. To talk a little about my feelings that I have on a personal level, the success for me shows that the things that I always thought when I was incarcerated and coming out, I always knew that I had family members that were supposed to be there because they're my family. But to see people who, some people didn't know me, some people had just met me, only known me through paper and just a name or a number, to see these people genuinely care about me and to try to get me focused and to have me have a positive outcome, now I get to step into that role.
Well, we are just about at the end. I just wanted to, it occurred to me that I don't think we addressed this, so this might be one of the questions that you have before we actually open it up to questions. But you might be wondering why we chose to do this in jails. Most of the, as a matter of fact, I think all of the recipients of these funds worked in prisons. We wanted to make sure that we could have some of the formerly incarcerated women that we were working with be involved in this. And so the majority of them lived in our Louisville area, and so we knew that we wanted that to be one of the sites. We were thinking about things like transportation, and we didn't want that to be hard for them. So we decided that we would choose jails as our site. That was one of our main reasons for that. And then the other reason for that was we thought if we're trying this out, perhaps we can work with people who have not been institutionalized necessarily. Their time in jail would not be that long, so maybe reentry would be easier. I don't know if that has actually been the result, but we thought maybe a good way to get our wheels on the ground would be starting in jail and then eventually moving into a prison setting. Like I said, right now we don't know for sure which is better or if maybe there's a combination of both. And there is a third component of this project. We do have an evaluator with the University of Kentucky. Her name is T.K. Logan. And so she's taking all of the information that we're gathering. Loretta mentioned those statistics that we gather. And we are doing our best to compile that, and then we get that to her, and then she's been evaluating along the way. So we've evaluated our training we're evaluating our training for our coaches. We're evaluating what participants' experiences are. We're looking at what the coaches' experiences are actually within their match. We are keeping incident reports so that we track as we go along places that we might need to correct. And then in the end, hopefully we'll have something lovely that says that we did a good job. So, Sue, I guess that's it for us as far as presentation goes. Do you want to open up to some questions now?
Sure. Thank you so much. That was incredibly informative. So thank you. We have a ton of questions, and we have way more questions than we're going to be able to address in these 15 minutes. So some of the stuff came up about sharing resources, and Pastor Donna Hubbard had some resources she wanted to share. So Pastor Hubbard, if you can send those to us, we can get those out to folks. And a question came up for you all about the publication you mentioned. Is that available for cost, or can people get it? Can you, the Swallowtail Project publication?
Yes. All you have to do is contact me. Is my contact information on these slides? I can't remember.
I am not sure.
Okay. Well, I can be contacted at L as in
there
Latanya.
It is. It's up on the.
There it is.
Right
yes.
now.
So if you'll contact me there, then we can get a book sent out to you. They are $25. That includes the shipping, the cost of shipping for that book. So if you just email me directly, we'll get one mailed out.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I also just want to say, because I did use the term mentoring when I was doing the introduction, and I just really wanted to thank you for your thoughtfulness about the choice of words and why you chose coach over mentoring and why you used participant and not inmate, and other people commented that they really appreciated that. I think that's really important. One of the participants also talked about, when you're talking about Mary Gilfus's pathways, she suggested that we consider adding language and cultural stigmas as another pathway, and I think that's a really important comment that we should make sure that we do that, add that to our list when we talk about Mary Gilfus's work and other pathways. So you did clarify this question. Lori Rogers from Michigan was wondering to make sure she was understanding if you were working in jail or prison, and you did clarify that you chose 2 county jails to work in, not a state correctional facility. So
yes.
Yes. one of the questions that came up was, what percentages of the coaches were survivors or formerly incarcerated? Do you know that?
I know that we've had some disclosures. That's not something we ask about their experience with the issue. We don't ask if they directly are a victim. We ask it in a way of, have you or someone that you care about been impacted by this kind of violence? That's our way to get an understanding about where they are. And if they have disclosed that, it's not something that I ask for from Loretta or our other coaching coordinator. It is something that we consider as they go through the training, where it makes us sensitive to if they're being triggered, how soon we would match an individual, but it's not anything that prevents them from being a part of the project at all. We do run a criminal background check, but that is also not something that would prevent someone from being in the program. There are some time stipulations around that based on what the jails say, and it has to be at least a year. I think it's at least a year since a charge if they were to be involved. We thought about that, and it would be contradictory for us to be talking about working with formerly incarcerated women. We contract with formerly incarcerated women, and then to make that be, one more barrier for someone who might want to give back. So we decided that, now certain charges, we will look twice at, but that is definitely not something that prevents someone from being a coach. At this point in time, we don't have anybody who has been incarcerated who is our coach at this point in time. But like I said, it's not something that is a deal breaker.
Yeah, there are a couple other questions about the diversity of the coaching staff, including whether or not they were survivors or formerly incarcerated, and about the racial and ethnic identities, and whether or not it was reflective of the people that you all were working with,
Well, we are in Kentucky, so about 7% of our population is people of color. And what we do know
What
is...
percent? Could you repeat that? I didn't hear.
We're about 7%.
7. I thought that's what you said.
Yeah, it's tiny. There's like 3 of us. So that percentage is very small. Within our coaching pool, though, I think we have done a good job of having a balance. We don't have any Latina inmate participants, nor do we have any volunteer mentors. When we're talking about Caucasians and African Americans, we've done a good job about balancing that. Might slightly be a few more Caucasians than we do African American women, and we don't have any male coaches at this point in time. The staff, as far as our KDVA staff, we are diverse when it comes to Caucasian females and African American females.
Yeah, and Antoinette, also, there was comments about how powerful what you were saying about having been there before and being able to, what I thought was really, I thought that was just beautiful about the thread and weave your personal experiences into the group and how very powerful that was. And after hearing that, I mean, the question was or the comment was, gosh, if you haven't been there, how can you actually even run a group? And I think a lot of us struggle with whether or not people who have not walked in those shoes should or can do those kind of jobs. So I thought that was powerful, and I think it's an ongoing conversation that many of us are having. But I think you guys made a very conscious choice to have somebody who was formerly incarcerated to go in to be able to do the threading and weaving about your personal experiences. I thought that was very powerful.
Thank you.
And I'll add, Sue, with that, Antoinette and the women that I mentioned in 2007, so we have been able to build strong relationships. So this was just an extension of that relationship. And so we also have a speakers bureau. And so we are actively working with women who want to share their story and kind of prepping them in ways. I do presentations with them. We go to universities. We've done television interviews. We've done panels. And so to me, this was the next logical step, and one in which they would regularly have the opportunity to practice the skills that they've learned and not only be identified as a formerly incarcerated woman. so that was one of the other pieces that I think is important. It does take an openness to building relationships with formerly incarcerated women, and I think that we have to make some space to let formerly incarcerated battered women know that they are welcomed and their stories are valuable, but that does not have to be the thing that always defines them. So, Antoinette and Gabrielle, I look at them as my colleagues as well as women that, we provided services to.
I'm sorry, if I can interject, being someone that facilitates groups as well as some individual sessions in the jail and never being incarcerated myself, I think some of the most important things to be able to build that rapport and to have the inmate participants trust you is, one, just being genuine, just being real, being who you are, showing up, being present, not looking at the clock every 5 minutes, trying to relate to them as much as possible. And then I know for myself, I try to put myself in their situation for as much as I possibly can. I try to think of what I would feel like if I was them, if I was their sister, if I was their mother, and that whole process. And that helps me be genuine, and it helps the grace and that flow of that relationship, I think.
And I just wanted to interject in there. Just doing the work. I've spoke at a national conference. I've spoke at the University of Kentucky. I've spoke at the Media Roundtable. So I've done a lot of other things, and I'm also attending school. Looking at it from my point of view, like Loretta said, just treating them as human beings. They're just like us. Some things we may do in our lives could cause us to be in the same situation that they're currently in. And I look at that. I really look at that. And when we have trainings, when we're training coaches or speaking to them about the ladies in groups, I always get to come in and talk to the coaches, and I kind of give them a feel of how the participants are in group, like maybe questions they may ask, or give them instances of some things that may happen in group, and just to let them know sometimes the smallest things make these women happy. Say they're in uniforms that they have to wear all the time, and their uniforms is like a bland color. Just coming in with lively colors on, coming in with bright pinks, bright oranges, things that you don't even have to know what to say. You could just come in with a smile on your face and a bright outfit, and you'll get they'll receive that in a way that you won't even think that could be received out here just on a day-to-day basis.
The other day someone asked me about, this is LaTanya, about why I do this work, why I'm constantly in jail and prison. And one of the, I finally came to the realization and understanding that if it were me, I would want someone to come for me. And I think that's what our battered women's movement really has been about. And this is the next space where we need to show up. And we have to shed all the stereotypes that we have and all the insecurities that we have, because the bottom line is that 1 in 9 Americans is incarcerated. And so if not you now, it could be you later, and if not you, it could be your neighbor who has just reentered. And so that's the way that I try to think of it, and a way that makes it seem less what's the word I'm looking for? It just helps to lessen the fears I might have around doing this work and going into the facilities.
Well, I'm hoping that maybe we can get you all to do actually another webinar, because there's a bunch of questions left, and I think one of the things that is very unique about Kentucky that they just sort of touched on is the long-term work that LaTanya has been doing with formerly incarcerated and then formerly incarcerated women. And they've done some very special, unique, and important events that have really given formerly incarcerated women the opportunity to bond together and to grow and to heal. And so I do think that this sort of the way they have set this up is really unique. It's not just saying, oh, you were formerly incarcerated, come and go do this group. I really think that maybe we can implore you to talk about what you did to develop this very important cadre of very well-supported women that was supported from the outside and had the opportunity to do peer support with one another. LaTanya, Antoinette, will you do this?
I think we'd be glad to.
Okay, because I think it's a really important part of this reentry work as well, which is developing those relations on the inside, and we know that. There are so many more questions. LaTanya and Antoinette and Loretta, we really want to thank you. Maybe we can get you some of the questions and we can do some of them in writing if we're not able to have another opportunity to come back together. Maybe we could interview you and then get those out to people who are on the webinar as a way to answering some of the other questions. One thing is how much was the grant for, and for how long?
It was 3 years. I'm sorry, 2 years, $300,000.
Okay. So with that, I just want to say that we're so excited.
That wasn't enough.
It wasn't. I'm sure it wasn't enough. And we do try to share as much information as we can about, second chance grant opportunities, and those are things to be looking at this time, because, like LaTanya said, there are very few projects set up specifically for women, and so I think the opportunity is really ripe right now for people who are working with women to get out there and hopefully get funded to do some of this work. So. Before we end, do you have any final words or comments, you wonderful women in Kentucky?
I just say if you're interested in doing this work, then just do it. It's very, very important. I can remember Antoinette telling me when we were out in California doing a workshop, she said, and I think you said this to the group, she said eventually we'll be the ones doing this work. And I think no truer words have been said. And in some cases, I think that should be the case. It does not say that if you have not been incarcerated that you should not be doing it, but I think it speaks to the fact that we have to make room so that we can do it in a different way. So if you feel compelled, then step in it.
With those words, step in it as our final words, I think we should end now. And thank you all so much, and thank you for your participation and your active questions. And thank you, LaTanya, Antoinette, and Loretta. It was really informative, and there's just so many more questions we all have, so I hope we can get you back. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.